Mommy, why are you crying? The wedding invitation trembled in Lola's hands as her 6-year-old daughter Emma tugged at her dress. The cream-colored cardstock felt like poison between her fingers, each embossed letter a deliberate wound. Ryan Mitchell cordially invites you to witness his union with Georgina Weatherstone. I'm not crying, sweetheart. The lie tasted bitter. Lola quickly wiped her eyes and tucked the invitation behind a stack of medical bills on her kitchen counter. Go play with your brothers. But Emma's sharp eyes had already spotted the elegant script. Is that from Daddy? The word hit like a physical blow. Daddy. The man who'd walked out when Lola was 7 months pregnant, calling her a gold-digging mistake, before his lawyers made sure she got nothing. The man who'd never even asked if she'd safely delivered their children. Emma, please. Just go play. As her daughter's footsteps faded toward the living room where 6-year-old twins Kevin and David were building with blocks, Lola sank into her worn kitchen chair. 3 years. 3 years since Ryan had destroyed her world, and now he wanted her at his wedding. The return address wasn't lost on her either, the same penthouse building where they'd once lived together, where she'd foolishly believed she'd found forever. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Janet, *, girl, please tell me you're not actually considering this insanity. *. Lola stared at the message. Janet was the only person who knew about the invitation, the only one who understood the twisted psychology behind it. Ryan wanted an audience for his triumph. He wanted to parade his success, his beautiful new fiancée, his recovered reputation, all while the woman who'd tried to trap him sat in the cheap seats, watching him win. Hey, my friend, hope you're doing well. Drop a comment and let me know how you're feeling about this story so far and where you are watching from. Some stories are too close to my heart to share on YouTube. I send those, along with little life lessons and surprises, to my email circle. If you'd like to be part of it, you can join with the link in the description. The invitation had arrived with a note in Ryan's familiar handwriting, *, I thought you should see how real success looks. No hard feelings. *. No hard feelings. As if he hadn't left her homeless and pregnant. As if he hadn't used his family's influence to blacklist her from every decent job in the city. As if the past 3 years of 16-hour workdays, government assistance, and sleeping on her sister's couch had been some minor inconvenience. Lola walked to her bedroom and opened her closet. Behind the scrubs from her night job at the hospital and the second-hand clothes from thrift stores hung a single garment bag. Inside was a dress she'd never worn, deep emerald silk that she'd bought with her first real paycheck from the medical research position she'd finally landed 6 months ago. She'd been saving it for something special. Maybe it was time. Her laptop sat open on the bed, displaying the email that had changed everything just 48 hours before the invitation arrived. The subject line still made her heart race, *, congratulations, Ms. Kendricks. Your research proposal has been approved for full funding. *. Lola Kendricks. She'd legally reclaimed her maiden name the day after Ryan left, shedding his identity like a snake sheds skin. The woman who'd been Lola Mitchell had died in that penthouse. What emerged was someone harder, smarter, more determined than Ryan could have ever imagined. Dr. Sarah Chen, her research partner and mentor, had called her discovery revolutionary. The pharmaceutical company backing her work had used words like paradigm-shifting and Nobel-worthy. But Ryan wouldn't know any of that. In his mind, she was still the broken girl he'd discarded. Mommy? Kevin appeared in her doorway, his dark hair tousled and his serious eyes, so much like his father's, studying her face. Are you sad about the pretty paper? Smart boy. Too smart. All 3 of her children had inherited Ryan's intelligence, though thankfully not his cruelty. No, baby. Mommy's just thinking. About Daddy? There it was again. That word that shouldn't exist in their vocabulary, shouldn't carry any weight or meaning. Yet somehow, despite never meeting him, despite Lola never speaking his name, the children had always known. Maybe it was the way other kids talked about fathers, or the way their eyes lit up whenever they saw a tall man with dark hair. "Daddy's getting married," she said quietly, surprised by her own honesty. Kevin nodded solemnly. "Will we see him?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Lola had spent 3 years protecting her children from the man who'd rejected them before they drew their first breath. She'd built walls so high that Ryan Mitchell might as well have been fiction. But now he'd made it personal again. "Would you like to?" she asked. Kevin considered this with the gravity of a much older child. "David wants to. Emma doesn't care. I think." He paused, chewing his lower lip. "I think we should meet him so we can decide if we like him." Out of the mouths of babes. Meet him so they could decide if they liked him. As if Ryan deserved that courtesy. As if he'd earned the right to their judgment. But maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. Lola pulled out her phone and opened a new text message. Her fingers hovered over the screen as her heart hammered against her ribs. 3 years of silence. 3 years of rebuilding. 3 years of becoming someone Ryan Mitchell could never break again. She typed, *RSVP, yes. +3. *. Her thumb hesitated over the send button. Once she pressed it, there would be no going back. No more hiding. No more protecting her children from the truth about their father. No more letting Ryan believe he'd won. The invitation sat on her dresser, mocking her with its elegant script and expensive paper. Ryan thought he was inviting his discarded ex-wife to witness his triumph. He had no idea he'd just invited Dr. Lola Kendricks, successful researcher, devoted mother, and a woman who turned his greatest cruelty into her most powerful motivation. She pressed send. Then she picked up the garment bag and smiled for the first time in days. Ryan wanted a show. She'd give him one he'd never forget. After all, he'd never asked if she'd given birth to 1 child or 3. That oversight was about to become the most expensive mistake of his very expensive life. The children would finally meet their father. And Ryan Mitchell would finally meet his reckoning. The text message showed as delivered, but Lola's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She set the phone down and stared at her reflection in the bedroom mirror. 3 years ago, the woman looking back had been broken, desperate, clinging to a man who saw her as disposable. Now she saw someone else entirely, someone with calloused hands from working multiple jobs, eyes that had learned to guard their secrets, and a spine that had been forged in the fire of abandonment. "Dr. Kendricks?" Kevin's voice carried from the kitchen. The phone's ringing. Lola glanced at the caller ID. Dr. Sarah Chen. Her mentor, her research partner, and the closest thing to family she'd found since rebuilding her life. Sarah was the only person who knew the complete truth about Ryan, about the children, about everything. "Lola, thank God you answered." Sarah's voice was urgent. "I just got off the phone with the investors. They want to move up the presentation. They're flying in tomorrow afternoon." Tomorrow. The day before Ryan's wedding. Lola closed her eyes, feeling the weight of timing pressing down on her. "Sarah, I can't. Tomorrow is. I know what tomorrow is." Sarah's tone softened. "Janet called me. She's worried about you." Of course she had. Janet meant well, but she'd never understood that some battles had to be fought alone. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're about to walk into a room full of people who destroyed you once before, carrying children they don't know exist, to prove a point that nobody except you thinks needs proving." Lola sank onto her bed. Sarah had a way of cutting through pretense like a surgeon with a scalpel. He invited me, Sarah. He specifically invited me to watch him marry someone else. That's not moving on, that's cruelty. So don't go. Let him have his little victory. You've already won, Lola. Your research is going to save lives. You've raised 3 incredible kids. You've built something beautiful from nothing. But that wasn't the point, was it? Ryan had spent 3 years believing he'd discarded her like trash. He'd married his perfect socialite, climbed higher in his family's empire, and never once wondered about the woman he'd left pregnant and penniless. He needed to know what he'd thrown away. He needed to see his children. The kids deserve to meet their father, Lola said quietly. The kids deserve a father who wants to meet them. There's a difference. Through her bedroom window, Lola could see Kevin and David in the small backyard, building something elaborate with sticks and rope. Emma sat nearby, reading a book that was far too advanced for her age. All 3 possessed Ryan's sharp intelligence, his determined focus when something captured their interest. But they'd also inherited something he'd never had: kindness, empathy, the ability to see beyond themselves. Sarah, what if I told you I've been getting calls? What kind of calls? Lola had been dreading this conversation for weeks. Investment firms. Private equity groups. They know about the research somehow. They're offering ridiculous amounts of money for exclusive licensing rights. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Sarah spoke. How ridiculous. Enough to never worry about money again. Enough to buy Kevin his own laboratory if he wanted one. And you think this is connected to Ryan somehow? I think the medical research community is smaller than we'd like to believe. And I think someone with enough influence could easily track down the promising young researcher who used to be married to Ryan Mitchell. The implications hung heavy between them. If Ryan knew about her success, if he'd somehow orchestrated the timing of his wedding invitation to coincide with her breakthrough, but that would mean he'd been watching her all along. Monitoring her progress. Keeping tabs on the woman he'd claimed meant nothing to him. Lola. Sarah's voice carried a warning. Promise me you'll be careful tomorrow. I promise. But as she hung up, Lola realized she had no idea what being careful even meant anymore. The woman Ryan had married 7 years ago had been careful. She'd been agreeable, accommodating, willing to reshape herself to fit his expectations. That woman had ended up homeless and pregnant with triplets she could barely afford to feed. The new Lola, Dr. Lola Kendricks, had stopped being careful the day she decided to survive. Her phone buzzed again. A response to her RSVP, but not from Ryan. The message came from a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Mitchell, we need to discuss your attendance at tomorrow's event. Please call immediately. James Morrison, Head of Security, Mitchell Industries. Head of Security. Ryan's family took their privacy seriously, but this felt excessive even for them. Unless Ryan had told them about the children. Lola's blood ran cold. If Ryan knew about Kevin, David, and Emma, if he'd known all along and simply chosen to ignore them, then tomorrow wasn't about humiliation. It was about control. About making sure his illegitimate children never became a threat to his carefully constructed new life. She dialed the number with trembling fingers. Morrison. The voice was clipped, professional, dangerous. This is Lola Kendricks. You sent me a message about tomorrow's wedding. Ms. Kendricks. Yes. I think there's been a misunderstanding about your invitation. Mr. Mitchell specifically requested your attendance, but there seems to be some confusion about additional guests. My children. Your children. Morrison repeated the words like they tasted unpleasant. I need to be very clear, Ms. Kendricks. The Mitchell family values their privacy above all else. Any disruption to tomorrow's event, any attempt to create scandal or extract financial gain from your situation, will be met with immediate legal action. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. Mr. Mitchell is marrying into one of the most prominent families in the country. The Weatherstones have certain expectations about propriety. Your children's existence has never been publicly acknowledged by Mr. Mitchell, and it won't be tomorrow. The casual cruelty of it stole her breath. Your children's existence has never been publicly acknowledged. As if Kevin, David, and Emma were inconvenient rumors rather than living, breathing human beings with their father's eyes and smile. Mr. Morrison, Lola said carefully, I think you should know that I'm no longer the frightened girl who left that penthouse 3 years ago. I'm Dr. Lola Kendricks now. I have resources, connections, and legal representation. If Ryan wants to play games, I'm more than happy to oblige. The silence stretched long enough that she wondered if he'd hung up. Dr. Kendricks, Morrison said finally, and something in his tone had shifted. I see. Well. That does change things, doesn't it? Yes. It does. Then perhaps we should meet before tomorrow's event. To clarify expectations on both sides. Lola's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it, the moment when her old life and new life collided. When Dr. Lola Kendricks came face to face with the machinery that had once destroyed Lola Mitchell. Where and when? Tonight. 9 o'clock. The Meridian Hotel, penthouse suite. Come alone. The line went dead. Lola stared at her phone, pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. Ryan hadn't just invited her to his wedding on a whim. This was orchestrated, calculated, designed to put her in a position where she'd have to choose between protecting her children and claiming her place at the table she'd once been kicked away from. But Ryan had made one crucial error in his calculations. He was still thinking of her as Lola Mitchell, the woman who could be intimidated, controlled, discarded. He had no idea that Lola Kendricks was the kind of woman who'd spent 3 years preparing for exactly this moment. Her phone rang again. Janet this time. Lola, honey, I know you think you have to do this, but... Janet. Lola's voice was steady, resolved. I need you to watch the kids tonight. I have a meeting. What kind of meeting? The kind that's going to determine whether Ryan Mitchell gets to pretend his children don't exist for the rest of his life. She could hear her sister's sharp intake of breath. Lola, please. Don't do anything dangerous. But danger, Lola was beginning to realize, was relative. The most dangerous thing she'd ever done was trust Ryan Mitchell in the first place. Everything since then had just been survival. And tomorrow, survival was going to become victory. The Meridian Hotel's penthouse elevator climbed through 30 floors of glass and steel, each passing second tightening the knot in Lola's stomach. She'd chosen her outfit carefully, the emerald dress she'd been saving, paired with the confidence she'd spent 3 years building. If Morrison wanted to intimidate her, he'd find she was no longer the type of woman who intimidated easily. The elevator doors opened to reveal a space that screamed old money and older power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while leather furniture and crystal decanters created an atmosphere of casual wealth. But it was the man standing by the windows who captured her attention. James Morrison looked nothing like she'd expected. Instead of the typical corporate security chief, ex-military, intimidating, built like a wall, she found herself facing someone closer to her own age. Tall, lean, with intelligent green eyes and the kind of understated elegance that suggested private schools and old family connections. Dr. Kendricks. He turned from the window with a slight smile. Thank you for coming. Can I offer you something to drink? I'd prefer to keep this brief. Lola remained near the elevator, every instinct telling her to maintain an escape route. You said we needed to clarify expectations. Indeed. Morrison gestured toward the seating area, but when she didn't move, he simply leaned against the window frame. Tell me, Dr. Kendricks, what do you know about the Weatherstone family? The question caught her off guard. I know they're wealthy. Old money. Georgina's father owns half the shipping industry on the East Coast. Thomas Weatherstone owns considerably more than that. He's also deeply conservative, extremely protective of his family's reputation, and has very specific ideas about the kind of man worthy of his daughter. Morrison's smile didn't reach his eyes. Ideas that don't include men with secret illegitimate children. The puzzle pieces began falling into place. Ryan doesn't know about the kids. On the contrary. Mr. Mitchell has known about your children since the day they were born. The words hit like a physical blow. Lola gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. That's impossible. He never tried to contact me. Because Thomas Weatherstone made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Marriage to Georgina, a guaranteed position as heir to the Weatherstone empire, and enough political influence to achieve any ambition he might harbor. All contingent on one simple condition: no complications from his past. Complications. Lola's voice was barely a whisper. He calls his children complications. Morrison's expression softened slightly. I think you misunderstand the situation, Dr. Kendricks. Ryan Mitchell is many things, but he's not a monster. Do you know how many anonymous donations have been made to your children's school over the past 3 years? How many mysterious scholarship funds have appeared just when you needed them most? The room seemed to tilt. The scholarship that had covered Emma's advanced reading program. The anonymous donation that had funded Kevin and David's science camp last summer. The mysterious benefactor who'd ensured their school lunch accounts never ran empty. He's been watching us. He's been protecting you. From a distance, yes, but protecting you nonetheless. The blacklisting that kept you from finding work. That ended 18 months ago when he quietly made calls to ensure you be considered for the research position. Lola sank into the chair she'd been gripping. Everything she believed about the past 3 years was crumbling. Then why the wedding invitation? Why now? Morrison moved to the bar and poured himself a scotch, his movements careful and deliberate. Because Thomas Weatherstone discovered the children's existence 3 weeks ago. He's given Ryan an ultimatum: publicly denounce any connection to you and the children at his wedding, or lose everything. Georgina, the inheritance, the political future he's been building toward. And Ryan chose his future over his children. Did he? Morrison's green eyes were unreadable. The invitation wasn't Ryan's idea, Dr. Kendricks. It was mine. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Lola stared at him, trying to process this new information. I don't understand. Thomas Weatherstone wants public humiliation. He wants you to show up tomorrow looking desperate and pathetic, so Ryan can reject you in front of 500 guests and prove his loyalty to the Weatherstone family. Morrison took a sip of his scotch. What he doesn't know is that you're not desperate or pathetic anymore. You're Dr. Lola Kendricks, brilliant researcher, devoted mother, and the woman who's about to become very, very wealthy. How do you know about the research funding? Morrison's smile returned, sharper this time. Because I'm the one who ensured it got fast-tracked for approval. Dr. Sarah Chen is my cousin, Dr. Kendricks. She's been keeping me informed of your progress. The world tilted again. Sarah had betrayed her. No, Sarah had been protecting her. But from what? And why? I still don't understand what you want from me. Morrison set down his glass and moved closer, his expression intense. I want you to do exactly what Thomas Weatherstone expects you to do tomorrow. I want you to show up at that wedding with your children. I want you to make a scene. Why? Because Thomas Weatherstone has spent the past 5 years grooming Ryan to be his political puppet. Senator first, then governor, possibly president. But politicians need to be squeaky clean, Dr. Kendricks. No skeletons, no scandals, no secret children who might surface at inconvenient moments. Understanding began to dawn. Unless those children are already public knowledge. Exactly. If the existence of Ryan's children becomes public knowledge tomorrow, in front of 500 witnesses, then Thomas Weatherstone can't use them as leverage anymore. Ryan becomes free to make his own choices about his family. And you think he'll choose us? The words came out bitter, disbelieving. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. I think Ryan Mitchell has spent 3 years hating himself for walking away from you. I think he's been trapped in a cage of his own ambition, and tomorrow you're going to hand him the key. What if you're wrong? What if he really has moved on? Then you'll have the satisfaction of knowing you gave him one last chance to be the man you once believed he could be. And if he fails? Morrison's smile turned predatory. Well, let's just say I have contingency plans. Lola stood, pacing to the windows where the city sprawled below them like a glittering circuit board. Somewhere out there, Ryan was probably at his bachelor party, celebrating his last night of freedom before binding himself to a woman and a future that had been chosen for him. Somewhere else, her children were sleeping peacefully, unaware that tomorrow would change everything. What happens to Georgina in all this? She doesn't deserve to be humiliated. Georgina Weatherstone is hardly an innocent victim. She's known about you and the children from the beginning. She chose to proceed with the wedding anyway because she values the Mitchell family name more than she values truth. Morrison joined her at the window. Besides, I suspect she'll be relieved. Marrying Ryan was always more about business than love. And if I refuse? If I take my children and disappear tonight? Then Ryan spends the rest of his life as Thomas Weatherstone's puppet. Your children grow up never knowing their father, and a very dangerous man gains even more political influence. Morrison's reflection met her eyes in the glass. But I don't think you'll refuse. Because you're not the type of woman who runs from fights anymore. He was right, and they both knew it. The old Lola might have taken her children and fled. But Dr. Lola Kendricks had spent 3 years learning that some battles were worth fighting, regardless of the cost. What exactly are you asking me to do? Morrison pulled out his phone and showed her a series of photographs. The wedding venue, a sprawling estate garden. The seating chart, with her name conspicuously placed in the back row. The timeline of events, carefully orchestrated to maximize exposure and minimize her opportunities to speak. I'm asking you to ignore everything they've planned for you. Arrive late, during the ceremony itself. Bring the children. Make sure everyone sees them. Make sure everyone knows exactly who they are. And then we find out what kind of man Ryan Mitchell really is when he has to choose between his past and his future in front of everyone who matters to him. Lola stared at the photographs, her heart hammering against her ribs. Tomorrow would be the point of no return. Whatever happened at that wedding would determine not just her future, but her children's futures as well. There would be no taking it back, no pretending it never happened. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. What's in it for you? Morrison was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. Because 3 years ago, I watched a good man make the worst decision of his life. And I've been waiting ever since for the chance to help him make it right. The elevator dinged softly behind them, but neither turned around. In the reflection of the window, Lola could see her own face, determined, frightened, resolute. Tomorrow, Ryan Mitchell would see that face again for the first time in 3 years. But he'd also see something he'd never expected to see. He'd see his children. And then, finally, they'd all discover who Ryan Mitchell really was when the masks came off. The morning of the wedding dawned gray and threatening, as if the sky itself disapproved of the proceedings. Lola stood in her kitchen, watching her children eat breakfast while her heart hammered against her ribs. In 6 hours, she would either reunite her family or destroy any chance of her children knowing their father. "Mommy, you look pretty." Emma smiled up at her, syrup on her chin and wisdom in her eyes that seemed far too old for 6 years. "Are you nervous about seeing Daddy?" Lola's phone buzzed before she could answer. Morrison again. They'd been texting since dawn, coordinating final details and backup plans. His latest message made her stomach drop, problem. Thomas Weatherstone arrived early. "He's asking questions about you. She stepped into the hallway to call him back. "How much does he know?" she asked without preamble. "Too much." Morrison's voice was tight with stress. "Someone leaked information about your research funding. He knows you're not the broken woman he expected." "Who would do that?" "I have my suspicions. The point is, he's changing the game. The wedding's been moved up an hour, and they've added extra security. They're trying to prevent you from getting close enough to make a scene." Lola closed her eyes, feeling the walls closing in. "Can you get us in?" "I'm working on it." "But Lola." Morrison paused, and she could hear voices in the background. "There's something else. Ryan knows you're coming." The world seemed to stop. "What do you mean he knows?" "Thomas told him this morning. Showed him photos of the children. Ryan's been locked in his room for the past hour. The groomsmen are starting to panic." Lola sank against the wall. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. Ryan was supposed to see the children for the first time when she walked into that ceremony. The shock, the realization, the public reckoning, all of it depended on the element of surprise. "What's he doing?" "In his room, I mean." "I don't know. But according to my sources, he's made 3 phone calls in the past hour. 2 to lawyers, 1 to a private investigator." Fear clawed at her chest. "He's coming after me. For custody. Or he's preparing to acknowledge them publicly." "There's no way to know until," Morrison's voice cut off abruptly. "James? James, are you there?" When he came back on the line, his voice was barely a whisper. "I have to go. Thomas is here. Don't come to the estate, Lola. Something's wrong. I'll call you back." The line went dead. Lola stared at her phone, panic rising like bile in her throat. Everything was unraveling before it had even begun. Morrison was compromised, Ryan knew about the children, and Thomas Weatherstone was actively working to prevent her from reaching the wedding. She walked back into the kitchen where her children were finishing breakfast, their innocent faces oblivious to the storm gathering around them. Kevin looked up as she entered, his dark eyes, so much like his father's, studying her with concern. "Mommy, are we still going to see Daddy today?" The question hung in the air like smoke. 3 years of protecting them, of building a life without Ryan, and now she was about to throw them into the center of a battle they didn't understand. What kind of mother did that make her? Her phone rang. Dr. Sarah Chen. "Lola, thank God. I've been trying to reach James, but his phone's going straight to voicemail." "Sarah, what's happening?" "Morrison said you're his cousin." "It's complicated. Look, I need you to listen carefully. The investors who've been calling you about your research, they're not legitimate pharmaceutical companies. They're front organizations for Thomas Weatherstone." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. He's been trying to buy my research. Not buy it. Bury it. If you own something that revolutionary, if you have that kind of financial independence, you become a threat. You could demand acknowledgement of the children, fight for custody, expose the family's manipulation of Ryan. Lola's knees went weak. He's been planning this all along. James figured it out yesterday. That's why he moved up the timeline, why he was so desperate to get you to that wedding. It's not just about reuniting you with Ryan anymore, Lola. It's about preventing Thomas from destroying your research and silencing you permanently. Where is James now? I don't know. But I do know Thomas Weatherstone doesn't leave loose ends. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too exposed. Lola looked at her children, still chattering happily about their day, and realized she'd been naive to think this was just about a wedding. This was about power, control, and the lengths wealthy men would go to protect their interests. Sarah, I need you to come get the kids. What are you going to do? I'm going to that wedding. With or without Morrison's help. Lola, that's insane. If Thomas is willing to eliminate business threats, what do you think he'll do to personal ones? But Lola was already moving, gathering her purse, her keys, the carefully chosen outfit that was supposed to be her armor for this battle. He made one mistake, Sarah. He showed Ryan the photos this morning. What difference does that make? Because for 3 years, Ryan has been living with the guilt of abandoning me. But he had no idea he'd abandoned his children too. That changes everything. Lola hung up and knelt in front of her children. Emma, Kevin, and David looked up at her with identical expressions of curiosity and trust. They deserved the truth, even if they were too young to fully understand it. Listen to me carefully, she said, taking their small hands in hers. Today we're going to meet your father. But some people don't want that to happen. Some people think families like ours shouldn't exist. Kevin's expression grew serious. Are we in trouble, Mommy? No, baby. But we're going to have to be very brave today. And we're going to have to stick together no matter what happens. Will Daddy be happy to see us? David asked, his voice small and uncertain. Lola's heart broke a little. I don't know, sweetheart. But he deserves the chance to try. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, *, Dr. Kendricks, this is Ryan. We need to talk. Meet me at the lake behind the Weatherstone estate. Come alone. Please. The message sent ice through her veins. Either Ryan was reaching out to her, or Thomas Weatherstone had Morrison's phone and was setting a trap. There was no way to know which without taking the risk. She forwarded the message to Sarah with a note, *, if you don't hear from me in 2 hours, call the police and take the kids to your sister's house in Portland. Then she looked at her children one more time. Emma with her fierce intelligence and protective instincts. Kevin with his analytical mind and gentle heart. David with his creative spirit and infectious laugh. They were the best parts of both her and Ryan, proof that something beautiful could come from even the most painful circumstances. Are you ready? She asked them. They nodded solemnly, and Lola felt a surge of pride so fierce it nearly brought tears to her eyes. Whatever happened today, whatever choices Ryan made or Thomas Weatherstone threatened, her children would know they were loved. They would know they were worth fighting for. The drive to the Weatherstone estate took 45 minutes through winding country roads lined with old money and older secrets. With each mile, Lola felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. She could still turn around. She could disappear with her children, start fresh somewhere Thomas Weatherstone's influence couldn't reach. But running had never solved anything. And somewhere in that estate, Ryan was waiting for answers to questions he'd only just learned to ask. The lake behind the estate was smaller than she'd expected, surrounded by weeping willows and morning mist. A single figure stood on the dock, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense with the weight of 3 years' worth of regret. Even from a distance, Lola would have recognized Ryan anywhere. The way he held himself, the dark hair that caught the light, the familiar silhouette that had once meant home and safety and forever. She parked the car and looked back at her children. "Stay here. Lock the doors. If anyone except me or your father approaches this car, you drive away and call Aunt Sarah. Do you understand?" Kevin reached over and squeezed her hand. "We understand, Mommy. Go get our daddy." The words nearly undid her. Go get our daddy. As if it could be that simple. As if love and family were things that could be reclaimed with courage and good intentions. But maybe, Lola thought as she walked toward the lake, sometimes they could be. Act 5, the midpoint devastation. Ryan turned as Lola approached, and the sight of his face nearly stopped her in her tracks. 3 years had aged him in ways that success and wealth couldn't hide. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a weight in his shoulders that spoke of sleepless nights and impossible choices. But it was the raw pain in his expression when he saw her that made her breath catch. This wasn't the cold, calculating man who'd called her a gold-digging mistake. This was someone who looked like he'd been carrying the weight of the world for 3 years. Lola. Her name came out like a prayer, broken and desperate. "God, you look different." She stopped 10 feet away, close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes but far enough to run if this was a trap. "I'm not the same woman you left pregnant and homeless, if that's what you're wondering." Ryan flinched as if she'd slapped him. I know you're not. Dr. Lola Kendricks, brilliant researcher, devoted mother." His voice cracked. "Mother to children I've never met. Children who don't even know I exist. They know you exist. They've always known." Lola's voice was steady, but her heart was hammering. "Emma asked about you when she was 4. Wanted to know why other kids had daddies and she didn't. You know what I told her?" Ryan's hands clenched at his sides. "What?" "I told her that sometimes daddies have to go away, but that doesn't mean they don't love their children. I've been lying to my daughter for 2 years, Ryan. Lying to protect you. To protect me. To protect the idea of you. Because despite everything you did to me, I couldn't bring myself to tell 3 innocent children that their father chose his ambition over their existence." Ryan stepped closer, and Lola could see tears threatening in his eyes. "You don't understand. You can't possibly understand what really happened. Then explain it to me." Ryan looked back toward the estate, where the wedding preparations were undoubtedly in full swing. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Thomas Weatherstone showed me pictures, Lola. Pictures of you leaving the clinic, medical reports, surveillance footage of you walking to work every day. He knew where you lived, where you worked, what route you took to the grocery store." Ryan's voice broke. "He told me that if I didn't disappear from your life completely, permanently, you'd have an accident. The kind of accident that would leave 3 children without a mother." The words hit Lola like a physical blow. She stumbled backward, her mind reeling. "You're lying." "I wish I was." Ryan pulled out his phone, scrolling to a folder of photos. "He's been sending me these for 3 years. Every month. Pictures of you and the kids. Proof that he's watching, that he knows exactly where you are at all times." Lola stared at the screen, her blood turning to ice. There she was, pushing a stroller through the park 2 years ago. Walking into the research building 6 months ago. Playing with the children in their tiny backyard just last week. The photos were taken with telephoto lenses, professional surveillance equipment. Someone had been watching her family for years. He told me, Ryan continued, his voice hollow, that as long as I stayed away, as long as I never acknowledged you or the children, you'd be safe. But if I ever tried to contact you, if I ever tried to be part of their lives. The accident clause. Lola felt sick. You've been protecting us by staying away. I've been going insane for 3 years, knowing my children are out there and not being able to meet them. Do you know what that does to a person? Watching them grow up in photographs like they're strangers. Lola looked back toward her car, where 3 small faces were pressed against the windows, watching their parents meet for the first time in their memory. The weight of understanding was crushing. Ryan hadn't abandoned them. He'd sacrificed his own happiness to keep them alive. Why are you telling me this now? Ryan's laugh was bitter, broken. Because this morning, Thomas made a mistake. He showed me current photos of the kids, and in the background of one of them, I could see James Morrison. The revelation hit like lightning. Morrison works for Thomas. Morrison has always worked for Thomas. Everything that's happened this week, the research funding, the wedding invitation, the meeting last night, it's all been orchestrated. Thomas wanted you here, Lola. He wanted you to bring the children. But why? If he's been threatening to hurt us for 3 years, why would he want us here now? Ryan's face went ashen. Because the threats aren't working anymore. I've been fighting him, quietly, for months. Trying to find ways to break free, to expose his control over our family. Thomas knows I'm getting stronger, more independent. He needs a permanent solution. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The wedding isn't about marrying Georgina. It's about eliminating the leverage you have over him. If something happens to you and the children at my wedding, it looks like a tragic accident. The heartbroken ex-wife who couldn't handle seeing me move on. Thomas gets his puppet son-in-law, I get a lifetime of guilt that keeps me in line, and... Ryan's voice broke completely. And I lose everything that ever mattered to me. Lola felt the world tilting beneath her feet. Morrison's urgency, his insistence that she bring the children, his cousin Sarah pushing her toward the research funding that would make her a target, it had all been manipulation. She'd been led here like a lamb to slaughter, and she'd brought her children with her. We have to get them out of here, she whispered. It's too late. Ryan pointed toward the estate, where black SUVs were emerging from behind the main building. Thomas has been tracking your phone. He knows exactly where you are. Panic clawed at Lola's chest. The children are the only thing keeping us alive right now. As long as they're with us, as long as witnesses can see them, Thomas can't make his move. The moment we try to run, the moment we split up. The SUVs were getting closer, moving with predatory precision down the winding road toward the lake. Lola could see armed men in the passenger seats, their intentions clear even from a distance. Ryan, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Lola's voice was steady despite her terror. Those children in that car are not just your children. They're the most important thing in the world to me. If you've spent 3 years protecting them from a distance, now you're going to protect them up close. What are you saying? I'm saying that whatever happens next, whatever choices we have to make, those 3 children survive this. Do you understand me? Ryan looked at her, really looked at her, and she could see the moment he understood that the woman standing before him wasn't the same person he'd married 7 years ago. This was someone who'd been forged in fire, someone who'd learned that love sometimes meant being willing to die for it. I understand. His voice was steady now, resolved. What do you need me to do? Help me get them to safety. And then. Lola looked toward the estate, where hundreds of wedding guests were probably taking their seats, oblivious to the drama unfolding at the lake. Then we give Thomas Weatherstone exactly what he wants. Which is a scene. A public confrontation. Something so visible, so witnessed, that he can't clean it up quietly. The SUVs were close enough now that Lola could see Morrison in the lead vehicle, his face grim with purpose. The man who'd pretended to help her, who'd manipulated her into trusting him, was leading the team that would eliminate her and her children. But Ryan was standing beside her now, his presence solid and real after 3 years of absence. And in her car, 3 brave little faces were watching their parents face down impossible odds together. For the first time in 3 years, Lola Kendricks wasn't fighting alone. The question was whether that would be enough. The SUVs stopped in perfect formation, creating a semicircle that blocked any escape route from the lake. Morrison stepped out of the lead vehicle, no longer bothering with his charming facade. The man who emerged was cold, professional, dangerous, everything Lola should have recognized from the beginning. "Dr. Kendricks, Mr. Mitchell." Morrison's voice carried across the water with deadly calm. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation." Ryan moved protectively in front of Lola, but she could see the futility in his posture. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped between the lake and Thomas Weatherstone's private army. "Let me guess," Lola called out, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. "Thomas wants to make us an offer we can't refuse." Morrison smiled, and the expression was chilling. "Actually, he wants to make you an offer you won't survive refusing." More vehicles appeared on the horizon, not SUVs this time, but wedding cars filled with guests who'd come early to enjoy the estate's gardens before the ceremony. Innocent people who had no idea they were about to become witnesses to something that would haunt them forever. "The children," Ryan whispered urgently. "We have to get them out of here before the guests see them." But Lola was already moving toward her car, her mind racing through possibilities. Every option led to disaster. If they ran, Morrison's team would hunt them down on the estate's private roads. If they stayed, Thomas would find a way to eliminate them in front of witnesses and blame it on a lover's triangle gone wrong. If they fought back. Her children's faces appeared in the car window, still trusting, still believing their mother could protect them from anything. Emma's small hand pressed against the glass, and Lola felt her heart shatter into a million pieces. "Mommy?" Kevin's voice drifted through the barely open window. "Are those the bad people you told us about?" The innocence in his question nearly brought her to her knees. Yes, these were the bad people. These were the men who'd spent 3 years stalking their family, threatening their safety, keeping their father away through fear and manipulation. "Ryan." Morrison's voice cut through her thoughts. "Your bride is waiting. Thomas thought you might want to say goodbye to your complications before you take your vows." "Go to hell, Morrison." "I'm afraid that's not an option." Morrison nodded to his men, who began moving closer with practiced precision. "You see, Thomas has decided that your little family reunion has gone on long enough. It's time to clean up loose ends." Lola heard the click of weapons being readied and felt the world narrow to a single, crystalline moment. She was going to die here, by this lake, while her children watched. Ryan was going to lose his family again, this time permanently. And Thomas Weatherstone was going to win. "Wait." Ryan stepped forward, hands raised. "Morrison, wait. Thomas doesn't have to do this. I'll marry Georgina. I'll be his perfect puppet. Just let them go." "Oh, Ryan." Morrison's voice carried mock sympathy. "You still don't understand, do you? This was never about controlling you through fear. This was about eliminating the evidence that you were ever anything but Thomas's loyal son-in-law." The wedding guests were getting closer, their laughter and conversation drifting across the grounds like echoes from another world. A world where families attended weddings together, where children grew up knowing their fathers, where love didn't come with a body count. "Please." Lola found herself moving toward Morrison, desperation overriding self-preservation. "Please, they're just children. They don't understand any of this. Let me take them somewhere far away. Somewhere they'll never be a threat to anyone. Dr. Kendricks, surely you're intelligent enough to know that's impossible. Children grow up. They ask questions. They want to know about their father. Morrison's smile was patient, almost kind, which made it infinitely more terrifying. Thomas simply can't allow that risk to exist. Behind her, Lola heard her car door opening. She spun around to see Emma climbing out, her small face set with determination that looked heartbreakingly familiar. Emma, no. Get back in the car. But Emma was already walking toward them, her 6-year-old courage absolute and devastating. Are you our daddy? She asked Ryan, her voice clear and strong. Ryan knelt down to her level, and Lola watched his face transform. For a moment, the fear and desperation fell away, replaced by wonder and love so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Yes, sweetheart. I'm your daddy. Why haven't you come to see us? The question hung in the air like an accusation. Ryan looked up at Lola, his eyes filled with 3 years' worth of pain and regret. Because I was scared, Emma. I made a terrible mistake, and I've been trying to fix it ever since. Are you going to fix it now? Morrison cleared his throat impatiently. This is very touching, but we do have a schedule to keep. 5 minutes, Ryan said, standing but keeping his hand on Emma's shoulder. Give me 5 minutes to explain to my children why they're never going to see me again. Ryan, no. Lola's voice was barely a whisper. Don't do this to them. But Kevin and David were already climbing out of the car, drawn by the sight of their sister talking to the man they'd wondered about their entire lives. They approached cautiously, these brilliant, beautiful children who deserved so much better than the legacy of violence and betrayal that had shaped their parents' lives. You look like us, David observed, studying Ryan's face with scientific curiosity. You have mommy's eyes, Kevin added solemnly. Ryan laughed, and the sound was broken and beautiful. You have my eyes, buddy. All 3 of you do. Lola watched her children meet their father and felt her heart break and heal simultaneously. This was what she'd dreamed of for 3 years, this moment of recognition, of connection, of family. But it was happening in the shadow of guns and under the threat of death, and the beauty of it was almost unbearable. Daddy, Emma said quietly, are the bad men going to hurt us? Ryan's jaw tightened, and when he looked up at Morrison, his expression was deadly. Not if I have anything to say about it. But you don't, Morrison replied calmly. That's rather the point. The wedding guests were close enough now that Lola could make out individual faces. Women in elegant dresses, men in expensive suits, all of them expecting a beautiful ceremony and a fairy tale ending. None of them expecting to witness the execution of a family that had dared to exist outside the boundaries of acceptable society. There is another option, Morrison said thoughtfully. Thomas isn't entirely unreasonable. He's prepared to offer you a choice, Dr. Kendricks. What kind of choice? You can walk away. Right now. Take your children, disappear completely, and never contact Ryan again. In exchange, Thomas will ensure your research gets the funding it deserves, your children get the best education money can buy, and you live comfortably for the rest of your lives. The offer hung in the air like poison. Financial security, safety, a future for her children, everything she'd struggled to provide for 3 years, handed to her on a silver platter. All she had to do was abandon Ryan to his cage and pretend her children had no father. And if I refuse? Morrison's expression didn't change. Then this becomes a tragedy. A disturbed ex-wife who couldn't accept her former husband's happiness. Who brought her children to his wedding as some sort of twisted revenge and ended up getting them killed in the crossfire. Lola looked at Ryan, seeing her own anguish reflected in his eyes. 3 years ago, he'd made the impossible choice to protect them by staying away. Now she was being offered the same devil's bargain, save her children by sacrificing their father. Mommy? Emma tugged at her dress. What are the bad men talking about? How do you explain to a 6-year-old that love sometimes means choosing death over surrender? How do you tell 3 innocent children that the world is so corrupt, so twisted, that their very existence is considered a threat worth killing for? Emma, baby, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Lola knelt down, gathering all 3 children close to her. Remember what I told you about being brave? They nodded solemnly. I need you to be braver than you've ever been in your whole lives. Can you do that for Mommy? Yes, they whispered in unison. Good. Lola looked up at Ryan, and something passed between them, an understanding, a resolution, a shared determination that whatever happened next, they would face it together. Because your daddy and I are about to do something very dangerous to keep you safe. The wedding bells began to ring in the distance, their joyful chimes a mockery of the scene playing out by the lake. Somewhere in that estate, Georgina Weatherstone was probably putting on her wedding dress, still believing she was about to marry for love instead of becoming a widow before her honeymoon was over. Morrison checked his watch. Time's up, Dr. Kendricks. What's your decision? Lola stood, her children pressed close to her sides, and looked directly into Morrison's cold eyes. My decision, she said clearly, is that Thomas Weatherstone can go to hell. Morrison sighed with what sounded like genuine regret. I was hoping you'd be more reasonable. The safety clicks on multiple weapons echoed across the water, and Lola realized that in choosing love over survival, she might have just condemned her children to die with her. But at least they would die knowing their father loved them. At least they would die as a family. The sound of weapons being readied was drowned out by something unexpected, the roar of motorcycle engines approaching fast across the estate grounds. Morrison's head snapped up, his calculated composure cracking for the first time. What the hell? He pressed his earpiece, barking commands into his comm unit. 3 motorcycles burst through the tree line, riding hard toward the lake. The lead rider wore no helmet, her dark hair streaming behind her like a battle flag. Lola's heart lurched with recognition. Sarah Chen. The bike skidded to a stop in a spray of gravel and mud, forming a protective barrier between Morrison's team and Lola's family. Sarah jumped off her bike, pulling a tablet from her jacket and holding it high above her head. Stand down, she shouted to Morrison's men. All of you, weapons down, now. Morrison's laugh was cold and dismissive. Dr. Chen, this is a private family matter. I suggest you leave before you get hurt. This stopped being private the moment you made it federal. Sarah's voice carried across the water with devastating authority. James Morrison, you're under arrest for conspiracy, kidnapping, and attempted murder. The words hit like lightning. Morrison's face went white, his carefully constructed mask finally slipping completely. You're not FBI, he said, but doubt flickered in his eyes. Special Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Financial Crimes Division. Sarah held up her badge, and even from 50 feet away, Lola could see it was real. We've been investigating Thomas Weatherstone's financial activities for 18 months. Money laundering, election fraud, extortion, conspiracy to commit murder. That's impossible. But Morrison was backing away now, his weapon lowering. Thomas cleared all FBI investigations. He has people inside. He had people inside. Past tense. Sarah's smile was sharp as a blade. Did you really think Dr. Lola Kendricks' research breakthrough was an accident? That her funding came from legitimate pharmaceutical companies? The revelation hit Lola like a physical blow. You used me as bait. We protected you, Sarah corrected firmly. Every step of the way. The anonymous donations to your children's school. FBI witness protection funds. The job opportunities that mysteriously appeared. We made sure you had the resources to rebuild your life while we built our case. Ryan stepped forward, his face a mask of fury and confusion. How long have you known? About Thomas, about the threats? Since the beginning. We've been monitoring his communications with Morrison for over a year. Every threat, every surveillance photo, every order to stay away from your family, we have it all recorded. Morrison was looking around desperately now, realizing that his escape routes were blocked and his authority was crumbling. But it was the expression on his face that made Lola's blood run cold, not defeat, but determination. The desperate resolve of a man with nothing left to lose. It doesn't matter, he said quietly, raising his weapon again. Even if Thomas goes down, even if you have recordings, these children are still a threat. They still know too much. What children? The voice came from behind Morrison's line, crisp and commanding and completely unexpected. Everyone turned to see Georgina Weatherstone walking across the grass in her wedding dress, her veil trailing behind her like a queen's train. But this wasn't the blushing bride they'd expected. This was a woman with steel in her spine and fury in her eyes. Georgina. Ryan's voice was barely a whisper. What are you doing here? What I should have done 3 years ago. Georgina stopped directly in front of Morrison, ignoring his weapon entirely. Stopping my father from destroying innocent people to protect his political ambitions. Morrison's confusion was evident. Miss Weatherstone, you need to leave. This situation is under control. Is it? Georgina pulled out her own phone, swiping to a voice recording. Because I have 3 hours of my father's confession right here. Every detail of his plan to eliminate Ryan's children, every threat he's made, every crime he's committed in the name of preserving our family's reputation. The audio began to play, Thomas Weatherstone's voice clear and unmistakable, asterisk, the children are a liability that can't be managed through conventional means. Morrison will handle it at the wedding. An accident, a tragedy, something that can't be traced back to us, asterisk. Ryan staggered as if he'd been punched. You knew. This whole time, you knew about the children and you still agreed to marry me? I agreed to marry you because I thought I could protect them better from inside the family than outside it. Georgina's voice cracked with emotion. I thought I could change my father's mind, find another way. But when I heard him planning their murders. She looked directly at Lola, and there was genuine remorse in her eyes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I let it go this far. Morrison was backing away now, his weapon swinging wildly between targets. This is insane. You're all insane. Thomas Weatherstone owns half the government. You think one recording is going to bring him down? Not one recording. Sarah held up her tablet again. 17 recordings. 43 documented threats. Bank records showing payments to 6 different assassination teams over the past 2 years. And witness testimony from his daughter, who's been cooperating with our investigation for 6 months. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity. Georgina hadn't been an unwitting victim, she'd been an undercover FBI asset, gathering evidence from inside her father's organization. The wedding wasn't real. None of it had been real. The research funding, Lola said suddenly. It was never about making me a target. It was about giving me the financial independence to survive testifying against Thomas. Exactly. We needed you strong enough to fight back, visible enough to be protected, and valuable enough that Thomas would make his move publicly rather than quietly. Sarah's expression softened. We also needed you to trust someone enough to bring your children into the open. Someone they could meet their father safely. Ryan was staring at Georgina with a mixture of gratitude and bewilderment. You sacrificed your reputation, your family, everything to protect my children. I sacrificed my relationship with a monster to protect innocent lives. Georgina's voice was steady, resolved. That's not sacrifice, Ryan. That's the first honest thing I've done in years. Morrison raised his weapon toward the children, his face twisted with desperate rage. None of this matters. They still know too much. They still have to. The gunshot was deafeningly loud across the water, but it wasn't Morrison who fired. One of his own men had shot him in the shoulder, sending his weapon spinning into the lake. "Sorry, sir," the agent said, removing his own earpiece and revealing the FBI wire underneath. "But we've been recording this entire conversation." Morrison collapsed to his knees, clutching his wounded shoulder and staring around at the team he'd thought was loyal to him. Half of them were removing their disguises, revealing FBI badges and recording equipment. The other half were surrendering their weapons and backing away from what they now realized was a federal sting operation. The wedding guests had finally reached the lake, drawn by the sound of gunshots and shouting. They stood in a cluster on the hillside, their elegant clothes and confused expressions a stark contrast to the scene of justice unfolding below them. Lola felt her knees give out as the adrenaline finally crashed. 3 years of fear, 3 years of running, 3 years of protecting her children from a threat that had been dissolving around them for months. She sank into the grass, pulling Kevin, David, and Emma close to her chest. "It's over?" Emma asked quietly. "It's over, baby." Ryan knelt beside them, his arms encircling his family for the first time. "I'm so sorry," he whispered against Lola's hair. "I'm so sorry I stayed away. I thought I was protecting you, but I was just scared. Scared of being the kind of father my own father was, scared of failing you again." "You didn't fail us." Lola looked up at him through tears she didn't realize she was crying. "You loved us enough to sacrifice your own happiness for our safety. That's not failure, Ryan. That's heroism." Sarah approached them carefully, giving the family space while keeping her badge visible for the gathering crowd. "There's going to be paperwork. Testimony. Trials. Thomas Weatherstone has connections in high places, and this isn't going to be easy. But we'll be safe." David asked, his small voice carrying across the water. "You'll be safe," Sarah promised. "And more than that, you'll be free. Free to be a family, free to know your father, free to live without looking over your shoulders." The sirens were getting closer now, federal agents and local police responding to Sarah's call for backup. In the distance, Lola could see Thomas Weatherstone being led away from the estate in handcuffs, his political empire crumbling in real time. Ryan stood, lifting Emma into his arms while Kevin and David pressed close to his sides. What happens now? Lola looked at this man she'd loved, lost, and found again under the worst possible circumstances. 3 years ago, she would have begged him to come home, to rebuild their marriage, to pretend none of this had ever happened. But Dr. Lola Kendricks was a different woman with different priorities. "Now," she said firmly, "we figure out how to be parents together. Not husband and wife, not lovers, not anything except two people who created 3 incredible human beings and owe it to them to do better." Ryan's smile was sad but genuine. "I'd like that. I'd like to try." Emma looked between her parents with the wisdom of a child who'd lived through more drama in 6 years than most people experienced in a lifetime. "Does this mean Daddy can come to my birthday party next month?" Ryan laughed, and the sound was free and genuine for the first time in 3 years. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away, Princess." As the FBI agents finished securing the scene and the wedding guests slowly dispersed to spread the story that would dominate headlines for months, Lola watched her children talk excitedly with their father about birthdays and science projects and all the ordinary, extraordinary things that made up a life. They'd won. Against impossible odds, against corruption and violence and the kind of power that usually crushed people like them, they'd won. But more importantly, they'd survived. They'd become stronger. And they'd learned that love, real love, was worth fighting for, even when the fight seemed hopeless. 6 months later, Lola stood at the window of her new research laboratory, watching Ryan teach Kevin and David how to throw a baseball in the courtyard below. The sight still took her breath away, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Messy, complicated, beautiful reality. The laboratory was everything she dreamed of during those long nights working double shifts to pay rent. State-of-the-art equipment, a team of brilliant researchers, and funding that would last for decades. The Thomas Weatherstone Foundation, renamed and restructured after his conviction, now focused exclusively on medical research and children's welfare programs. Poetic justice at its finest. Dr. Kendricks. Her research assistant appeared in the doorway. The documentary crew is here for the interview. Lola nodded, smoothing down her lab coat. The past 6 months had brought a parade of journalists, filmmakers, and writers, all wanting to tell the story of the family that had brought down one of the most powerful political machines in the country. She'd agreed to this final interview because the proceeds would fund scholarships for children from broken homes. But also because she had one more truth to tell. The camera crew set up in her office, professional and efficient. The interviewer, Maria Santos, was known for her integrity and her ability to handle sensitive subjects with grace. Dr. Kendricks, thank you for agreeing to speak with us today. 6 months ago, you were working night shifts to support your children. Today, you're running one of the most advanced medical research facilities in the country. How has your life changed? Lola considered the question carefully. The external circumstances have changed dramatically. But the most important things, my children's happiness, their sense of security, their relationship with their father, those changes happened more slowly. Those took work. Tell us about that work. Ryan and I didn't just pick up where we left off. We couldn't. Too much had happened, too much damage had been done. We had to learn how to be co-parents first, friends second, and, well, we're still figuring out what comes after that. It was true. Ryan had moved to the city, bought a house 10 minutes from theirs. He picked up the children for school 2 days a week, coached Kevin's Little League team, and read Emma bedtime stories over video chat when he traveled for work. He was building relationships with his children, one conversation, one shared experience at a time. The trial of Thomas Weatherstone made headlines around the world. What was it like testifying against such a powerful man? Terrifying. Liberating. Necessary. Lola's voice was steady, but the memories still carried weight. Thomas Weatherstone represented everything that's wrong with unchecked power. The idea that wealthy men can destroy families, manipulate elections, even order murders, simply to protect their interests. Someone had to stand up and say that was unacceptable. Your testimony was crucial to his conviction on 17 federal charges. Do you feel justice was served? I feel like accountability was served. Justice would be if none of this had ever happened. Justice would be if Emma, Kevin, and David had grown up knowing their father from the beginning. Lola paused, choosing her words carefully. But accountability is a start. What about James Morrison? He was sentenced to 25 years for conspiracy and attempted murder. Morrison was a symptom, not the disease. He believed that serving powerful men was more important than protecting innocent people. Unfortunately, our society creates a lot of James Morrisons. Maria leaned forward slightly. There's been speculation about the relationship between you and Ryan Mitchell. Can you tell us about that? Lola had been dreading this question, but she'd also been preparing for it. Ryan and I are learning to be partners in raising our children. We're learning to trust each other again after years of separation and manipulation. Whether that becomes something more." She shrugged. "We're taking it one day at a time. Are you open to that possibility?" "I'm open to the possibility of whatever serves our children best. They've been through enough upheaval. They deserve parents who are committed to their welfare above everything else." It was a diplomatic answer, but it was also true. The romantic fairy tale ending that everyone wanted, the reunion, the remarriage, the happily ever after, wasn't their story. Their story was more complicated, more real, and ultimately more meaningful. "Dr. Kendricks, you've become something of a symbol for single mothers fighting against impossible odds. What message do you have for women facing similar struggles?" Lola looked directly into the camera, thinking of all the women who'd sent her letters over the past 6 months. Women working multiple jobs, raising children alone, fighting systems designed to keep them down. Your worth isn't determined by whether someone chooses to stay or leave. Your children's worth isn't diminished by the absence of a parent who wasn't ready to be present. You are stronger than you know, more capable than you believe, and more deserving of respect than the world might tell you. She paused, emotion thickening her voice. And if you're raising children who don't know their other parent, remember that you're not responsible for filling that void. You're only responsible for loving them so completely that they know their worth regardless. Any final thoughts? Lola was quiet for a long moment, watching through the window as Ryan lifted Emma onto his shoulders while the boys chased after them. 6 months ago, that scene would have been impossible. Not because of Thomas Weatherstone's threats, but because Ryan hadn't been ready to be the father his children deserved. People talk about this story as if it's about a woman getting revenge on the man who wronged her. But that's not what this is. This is about a family learning that love isn't enough, you also need courage, honesty, and the willingness to do better than the people who came before you. The interview wrapped up with handshakes and promises to send advance copies of the documentary. As the crew packed their equipment, Lola's phone buzzed with a text from Ryan, "The kids want to show you their baseball skills. Also, we need to talk about Kevin's science fair project. He's trying to clone a hamster." She laughed, typing back, "on my way down. And absolutely not on the hamster cloning." As she headed for the elevator, her research assistant called out, "Dr. Kendricks? The call from Stockholm came in while you were filming." Stockholm. The Nobel Committee. Lola's heart skipped a beat. Her research on pediatric autoimmune disorders had been groundbreaking, but she'd never dared hope. And congratulations, Dr. Kendricks. They'll be announcing it officially next week. The Nobel Prize. The highest honor in her field, recognition that would cement her research's place in medical history. A year ago, she'd been working night shifts at a hospital. Now she was about to join the ranks of the world's most celebrated scientists. But as she stepped into the elevator and headed down to the courtyard where her children were waiting, Lola realized that the prize, as incredible as it was, wasn't the victory that mattered most. The victory that mattered most was in the sound of Emma's laughter as Ryan spun her around. It was in Kevin's excited explanation of centrifugal force as he demonstrated his pitching technique. It was in David's quiet confidence as he showed off the perfect spiral he'd finally mastered. The victory was in Ryan's text the night before, "Emma had a nightmare about the bad men coming back. I stayed with her until she fell asleep. Thank you for trusting me with that." The victory was in the family they'd built from the wreckage of the family they'd lost. She stepped out into the courtyard, and 3 children immediately surrounded her, chattering about baseball and science projects and plans for the weekend. Ryan approached more slowly, his expression warm but careful, still learning the boundaries of this new relationship they were building. "How did the interview go?" he asked. "Good. I told them the truth. Which truth? There are several versions of this story floating around. Lola looked at him, this man who'd been her first love and her greatest heartbreak, who was now her partner in the most important job either of them would ever have. I told them that some stories don't have fairy tale endings. But that doesn't mean they don't have happy ones. Ryan's smile was soft, understanding. Speaking of endings, I have something to tell you. Something I should have said 6 months ago. Lola's heart stopped. What? I'm not the same man you married 7 years ago. I'm not even the same man who walked away 3 years ago. I've learned things about myself, about what I want, about what matters. He paused, looking at their children playing nearby. I don't know if we can ever be what we were. But I'd like to find out what we could be. It wasn't a proposal. It wasn't a declaration of undying love. It was something better. It was an honest acknowledgement of growth, of possibility, of two people who'd been through hell and emerged as better versions of themselves. I'd like that too, Lola said quietly. Mommy. Daddy. Emma called from across the courtyard. Come play with us. They walked toward their children together, not as the couple they'd once been, but as the family they were becoming. Behind them, the research laboratory hummed with the sound of work that would save lives, funded by the fortune of a man who'd tried to destroy them. Justice, Lola thought, came in many forms. Sometimes it was a conviction in a courtroom. Sometimes it was a scientific breakthrough that would help sick children. And sometimes it was simply the sound of children calling for their parents, secure in the knowledge that both would answer. As Ryan lifted Kevin onto his shoulders and Emma grabbed Lola's hand, she realized that the greatest revelation wasn't anything that had happened in a courtroom or a laboratory. The greatest revelation was that love, when combined with courage and truth, could rebuild anything. Even a family that had been torn apart by the worst kinds of human greed and cruelty. They were living proof that some stories, even the most broken ones, could still have beautiful endings. 2 years later, Lola stood in her kitchen, but this time the tears on her cheeks were tears of joy. In her hands wasn't a wedding invitation meant to humiliate her, but a small, handmade card covered in crayon drawings of stick figures holding hands. Happy Mother's Day, Mommy, Emma said proudly, bouncing on her toes. We made it ourselves. With Daddy's help, Kevin added honestly, because at 8 years old, he'd developed an almost scientific commitment to accuracy in all things. Just a little help, David chimed in. We did most of it. Lola opened the card to find a message written in Ryan's careful handwriting, but clearly dictated by 3 excited children, to the best mommy in the whole world, who taught us that families come in all different shapes, and that love is stronger than anything bad people can do. Thank you for being brave enough to fight for us. We love you to the moon and back again. Emma, Kevin, David, and Daddy. The final word was written in a different color crayon, added separately, hesitantly. Still learning his place in this reconstructed family constellation. It's beautiful, Lola whispered, and meant it. She looked up to find Ryan standing in the doorway of her kitchen, their kitchen now, though that had been a gradual transition that had taken months of careful negotiation and family meetings where 8-year-olds had surprisingly strong opinions about bathroom schedules. The Nobel Prize ceremony photos came in, Ryan said, holding up an envelope. Emma specifically requested copies for her Mommy's Awesome Stuff scrapbook. The Nobel Prize. Even 2 years later, it felt surreal. Dr. Lola Kendricks had stood on a stage in Stockholm, accepting recognition for research that would save thousands of children's lives, while her own children watched from the audience next to their father. The girl who'd once been discarded like trash had become one of the most respected scientists in the world. But more importantly, she'd become the mother her children deserved. Can we see them? David asked, reaching for the envelope. After breakfast, Ryan said firmly, but with the kind of gentle authority that had taken him 2 years to develop. Learning to be a father had been his own journey of transformation, from the ambitious young man who'd valued success over family to someone who measured his days in school pickup times and bedtime stories. The kitchen filled with the comfortable chaos of a Sunday morning, Emma practicing piano scales in the living room, Kevin conducting what he called breakfast experiments with his cereal, David reading a book that was definitely too advanced for his age but which kept him happily occupied. "The interview requests are still coming in," Ryan said quietly, refilling Lola's coffee cup. 60 Minutes wants to do a follow-up piece on the Weatherstone Foundation's new initiatives. And I think we should say yes. The scholarship program has helped over 3,000 kids so far, but it could help more with the right publicity. Lola smiled. The man who'd once been terrified of public scandal now actively courted media attention when it served a greater good. Growth looked different on everyone. The Weatherstone Foundation had become something Thomas had never intended, a force for actual good in the world. Under Georgina's leadership and with oversight from a board that included both Lola and Ryan, it funded medical research, supported single parents, and provided legal aid for families fighting powerful adversaries. Georgina herself had testified before Congress 3 times in the past 2 years, advocating for stronger regulations on corporate political influence. She'd become something of a hero to progressives, though she still sent Christmas cards to the children and had taken Emma to see the Nutcracker last December. "Mommy," Emma called from the living room, "Mrs. Chen is here." Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, carrying flowers and wearing the slightly overwhelmed expression of someone who'd volunteered to help with a Mother's Day brunch and was beginning to regret it. "Please tell me you have this under control," she said, watching Kevin attempt to balance spoons on his nose while David provided scientific commentary. "Define under control," Lola laughed. "The kind where no one ends up in the emergency room." "Then yes, we have it under control." Sarah had become family in the truest sense over the past 2 years. Aunt Sarah, who taught the children how to change a tire and helped with advanced math homework and served as the objective third party when Lola and Ryan needed to work through their own complicated relationship dynamics. Because it was complicated. They weren't the couple they'd been 7 years ago, and they couldn't pretend that 3 years of separation hadn't left scars. But they'd learned to talk to each other, to co-parent effectively, to support each other's dreams while maintaining their own independence. Some nights, Ryan stayed for dinner and helped with homework and fell asleep on the couch while they watched movies as a family. Some nights, he went back to his own apartment because Lola needed space and he respected that. They were writing their own rules for what family could look like. "Any word from Morrison?" Sarah asked quietly, helping herself to coffee. "His parole hearing got denied again. He'll serve the full 25 years. Ryan's voice was matter-of-fact. James Morrison had become a cautionary tale about the consequences of serving power instead of justice. Thomas died in prison last month. Heart attack. They observed a moment of silence that wasn't quite grief but wasn't quite relief either. Thomas Weatherstone had been a monster, but he'd also been a human being whose choices had cost everyone, including himself, more than anyone should have to pay. "You know what I realized?" Emma said suddenly, appearing with her arms full of Mother's Day crafts from school. "Our story is like one of those fairy tales, but better." "How so, sweetheart?" Lola asked. "In fairy tales, the prince saves the princess and they live happily ever after. But in our story, Mommy saved herself, and Daddy learned how to be a real daddy, and we all saved each other." Emma's 8-year-old wisdom was delivered with the absolute certainty that only children possess. "That's better than a fairy tale because it's real." Ryan caught Lola's eye across the kitchen, and something passed between them, gratitude, wonder, love in all its complicated forms. Their daughter was right. Their story was better than a fairy tale because it was true, messy, imperfect, and beautiful. Plus, Kevin added pragmatically, in fairy tales, the kids usually don't get to help save the day. We got to be heroes too. You absolutely did, Lola agreed, pulling all three children close for a hug that smelled like syrup and childhood and possibilities. Later, after the brunch dishes were cleared and Sarah had gone home and the children were napping off their sugar crashes, Lola and Ryan sat on the back porch watching the sun set over the garden Emma had insisted on planting. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd made different choices? Ryan asked quietly. Every day. But then I remember that every choice, even the painful ones, led us to this moment. To these children, to this family, to who we've become. Lola leaned back in her chair, feeling the peace that came from a life fully lived. I wouldn't change any of it, Ryan. Not even the worst parts. Not even the 3 years of separation. Especially not the 3 years of separation. That's when I learned who I was when I wasn't defined by being your wife. That's when I became someone worthy of being their mother. Ryan nodded slowly. And that's when I learned the difference between wanting a family and being ready to deserve one. The garden Emma had planted was blooming now, roses and daisies and wildflowers all mixed together in glorious, chaotic abundance. Like their family, it was unconventional but beautiful, requiring constant care but rewarding that care with something magnificent. Ryan? Yeah. I love you. The words came easily now, without fear or reservation. Not the way I loved you 7 years ago, not the desperate, clinging love that was afraid of being alone. I love you the way someone loves a partner in the most important work of their life. Ryan's smile was soft, genuine, complete. I love you too. All of you. This whole complicated, beautiful mess we've built together. Inside the house, they could hear the children starting to stir from their naps, Emma's voice calling for them to come see something urgent and wonderful. In a few minutes, they'd go inside and help with homework and figure out dinner and navigate the 1,000 small joys and challenges that made up a day in their life. But for now, they sat in the garden their daughter had planted, watching the sun set on a Sunday that felt like a gift. Somewhere in the city, the Weatherstone Foundation was funding scholarships for children who needed hope. Somewhere else, Lola's research was helping sick kids get better. Somewhere in time, 3 children were growing up secure in the knowledge that they were loved, wanted, and worth fighting for. The story that had begun with tears over a cruel wedding invitation had become something none of them could have imagined, a testament to the power of love, courage, and second chances. And in the garden where wildflowers grew alongside roses, where chaos and beauty coexisted in perfect harmony, Lola Kendricks knew that some stories really could have happy endings. Even the most broken ones. Especially the most broken ones. What did this story teach you about the power of resilience, the complexity of love, and the courage it takes to rebuild what seems irreparably broken? Drop your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories that will change how you see the world.